Thanks everybody for joining this session on our Microsoft healthcare data solutions in Fabric. Thanks for joining. My name's Jim Novak. I work with the Health and Life Sciences data platform team at Microsoft, and we build healthcare solutions focused on providing data platforms for our customers across multiple different technologies. And what I'll talk about today is a solution offering we have in Microsoft Fabric. So what we'll do real quick is I'll take a little bit of a step back and talk about why we're building these things. What are we building these solutions for in healthcare, and specifically why healthcare? But one of the things I wanted to talk about, the reason I wanted to talk about this is it's a little bit of the art of the possible. So we're building a solution on top of Fabric, and I'll get into the later solution. But first off, I wanted to talk about the reasoning behind it. Talk very, very quickly about Fabric. I'm guessing that most everybody on the call is familiar with Fabric. Then I'll talk about our solutions that are built on them, some of the capabilities that we offer, and then what I'll do is I'll just jump into the solution and walk you through a couple of the capabilities that we have available. So very quickly, this is something that I think that everybody knows that AI is big right now, and Microsoft is investing heavily in it, as we've all seen. But it's for good reason. AI is shifting a lot of things that we do today in business. So for every individual, it empowers us to achieve more, enhancing our productivity and our decision making. Teams, it enables greater collaboration, streamlining workflows, and fosters collaborative success. And within industries, it drives innovation. It creates efficiencies, and it's redefining what's possible in a lot of ways at scale. So AI is here. It's actively happening, and it's driving a lot of what our industry is doing. And healthcare is no different. Healthcare as a technology industry has been around for quite a while, for several decades. We've relied on clinical systems to help care for patients, do outreach, all kinds of different work. So electronic medical records is something we've been talking about for quite some time. Most of us here on the call have gone to the doctor at one point. We have to talk about our medical records. But the reason, because we have all these advancements over the years, our expectations are higher, right? And healthcare is being impacted by that. Our expectations are driving our healthcare industry changes. The other challenge with that is the more people that are demanding healthcare, with changing populations across the world, people living a bit longer, living healthier, our care teams have an additional burden, and they're getting a bit burnt out. You can see some of the numbers I have here on the screen around that. And that means our organizations are under constant pressure to innovate. And you can see that we've got massive investments by our healthcare industry partners that Microsoft is talking to, as well as out in the world outside of Microsoft. They're investing heavily in healthcare. And the last statistic is something that threw me when I first heard it. I always bring this up. The more data we have, the more solutions we have, the more patients and in the U.S. space, we deal with, we talk about providers and payers, right? So claims data, the more data we have, the more demand we have, the more data we have. So the volume and the velocity is increasing. And the statistic of 97% of that goes unused is just really a shocking statistic. And you can see 50 petabytes every year in these siloed systems, right? And that just makes it almost impossible to work with this data. And underneath it all, you can see that last line on the slide: we're always under pressure to remain secure and compliant. So anything we do with healthcare data, security and compliance is at the heart of everything we do. It cannot be an afterthought. Again, if we've all been to the doctor, we all want our privacy, and it's very important to us. And we know about this, so we know what's happening. We know the process is happening, and we agree, in the industry that we need change, right? So, but it's hard. It's a challenge. We can't just stop what we're doing, invent new technology, and then roll it out. We have to continue doing work with the systems we have while we're innovating, while we're building new things. So we have our providers agree the benefits of this change, but it hasn't been accomplished yet. And you can see the numbers behind these statements. And it's a pretty interesting challenge that we have. We know we want it, but it's hard to capture. And the reason I mentioned AI to start off with, a lot of what we're doing with the data is going to be driving AI. Unfortunately, in healthcare, the data isn't AI ready. So a lot of our healthcare data is unstructured and multimodal. You can see the different details here of these statistics. The data silos is a massive problem, right? So we have all these legacy systems. Some of them have been around for decades. and some of them are new. So we've got this mix and match of old and new systems. And again, we can't just turn things off and turn them on. We have to continue caring for people. So that makes it a huge challenge with our siloed systems. Again, both old and new. So to tackle this, unifying our data is an essential key to get past this. So to make it AI ready, to get past these silos, unifying data, putting everything into one place is kind of the foundation of what we need to do. And this is some of the driving reasons behind what we're doing in this healthcare data solutions in Fabric. So we want to provide this unified, centralized, democratized, if you want to call it that, data estate for our customers. And so break down the silos, bring everything together, and let them work on it in a single pane of glass, if you want to think of it that way. Again, the reason for that is if we want to empower AI, data is behind everything, right? Data drives everything. AI is only as good as the data behind it. You've seen the results. Sometimes they're a little bit skewed, so we have to have really good, solid, unified data before we can start applying our AI innovations and AI tooling to it. So I mentioned that these silos are a problem, right? And it's not just healthcare, but healthcare we have. We're talking about healthcare in this case, but a lot of industries have this problem. We got all these different disparate systems, whether it's manufacturing or retail or whatever. But healthcare, we've got all these different modalities of data, and they all have their own format, and they are often implemented by siloed systems, just sitting off in an on-prem system or in some other cloud system that is very specialized. And you can see just walking around this screen. A little clockwise, starting with conversational data, the inpatient, outpatient call center, the conversations you have with your clinician and your call center personnel, that is captured right now in a lot of different systems. Patient engagement data, anytime you call in, you submit a case, you get an email from your provider. Social determinants of health is another data set that helps drive indicators behind how you're going to respond to certain things. So it's a very important data set, but it's also very unstructured. There's no one schema for it. Claims is exactly what it sounds like. Again, very much a US-based user scenario, but we've got financial information we're storing with claims data. Genomics data is a really complex data set and really, really hard to capture. Imaging data is anything you deal with X-rays, CAT scans, MRIs, all that kind of imaging data has got its own structure, its own format, and its own series of systems for managing it. Again, some of these have been around for quite a long time. And then we've got clinical records data, or EHR data. Again, it's very, very different from the previous note on this chart. Imaging data is very different from clinical data, and this is what we typically think about as an EHR. And by the way, I'm going to keep an eye out. If you have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat. I'll try to make sure I can capture it. On this siloed data, this is the challenge. This is the challenge we face. If we want to have a holistic patient 360 view, how do we get past all these different systems, pull it together into a single place? And we want it to look like this, right? We want everything to be accessible in a single solution, in a single pane of glass, as I've said before. We want to make it accessible to multiple different personas, not just data scientists or report writers, not just a clinical system, somebody who's taking an X-ray and evaluating it. We want to tie all this data together, connect all this data, if you want to call it that. And what we've decided on Microsoft Fabric as our platform of choice for this. Our team, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to work with tooling that is readily available. And Fabric is our choice. It's been around for 15, 16 months in general availability, and we've been building on it that entire time. So I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment about how we fit in with Fabric. But the overall approach that we're trying to do, and I've kind of alluded to it a few times, we want to bring data together, capture data in a unified place, and transform it into a format that's accessible to multiple different personas. Again, we don't want you to have to be just a report writer having your one silo of data. We want to pull things together and unify it together with, I mentioned the modalities, just as an example. I'll show you a little bit later in the demo. Bringing together clinical data and imaging data as an example. So we want to unify this data, but dumping it all in one place, it doesn't stop there because everything has its own format. Some of the standards you probably saw in the previous slides, we try to align with standards as much as we can during this process. And again, not very different from a lot of other generic, data projects. We want to follow standards where possible so that all of our people are speaking the same language. Anybody that might use our platform already knows what we're talking about. So you've seen FHIR, and we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail later, but FHIR and DICOM and CCLF claims data. We're trying to follow industry standards, so you can come in, look at our stuff, and be familiar with it to start with. And those are the data models we focused on. But unifying that also requires some transformation and some harmonization of the data. So we first bring it together. We connect it using some of the tools in Fabric. We'll talk about it in a second. And then we have some things we've built on the back end, some services that handle transformations from one format to another into a unified data store. And what this allows us to do is make sure the data is solid, it's clean, it's pulled together into a single place, and then we make it AI ready, right? So then we can start applying like the data foundry and the real-time analytics to tooling to our data once it's in these different lake houses. And then once all that's done, the last step, of course, is build stuff with it, right? And we're not just talking report writing. You could build your own copilot that goes against your lakehouse and offers up solutions, in a conversational way. You can build loads of reports too. But that and enabling for those AI tools is step one: connecting it, transforming it, and then making it available for these solutions. And then this is actually meant to be an iterative process, right? There should be another arrow for a loop there, because you then take those results. Hey, I need my solution to do X, Y, or Z, and it's a continuous process for bringing this data together. So you've got your inbound transformations, and you might have to tweak those a little bit. You might have to modify them a little bit to meet your needs, and then rebuild your solutions, redeploy. So Fabric gives us the platform to take this approach, connecting data, transforming it, harmonizing it, and then making it AI ready for the end customers within your organization. So Fabric, again, this is a Fabric conference, so I'm guessing that everybody here is pretty familiar with Fabric. Again, I believe it was 15, 16 months old, something like that. I was just at the Fabric conference, and they gave a really good background on the platform and how it came together. The nice thing is a lot of the tools, and I think the analogy I heard is Fabric is like the Office for data, right? Office, you get Word, PowerPoint, all those tools. Fabric, you get Data Factory, Synapse, warehousing, science, engineering, real-time analytics, Power BI. You get all these different tools all built on a unified lake, right? I heard it's also one lake is OneDrive for data, something like that. But it's effectively bringing together a lot of tools that many in the industry are already familiar with. So that's really nice that they're not reinventing something new that you have to go learn. They're bringing together things that are already familiar to a lot of people in the industry, and they're making it accessible. Again, single pane of glass is the phrase I keep hearing, and it makes a lot of sense. I can come in I'm not a data scientist myself, but I can jump in, start using a lot of these tools without a lot of ramp up. I can hand it off. The data transformations, I can use some of the tooling in there to build something and hand it off to the next person on my team without having to go through multiple different platforms to get to the data that I need. Bringing all that together into one lake and then applying all these tools to it is a core piece of Fabric. And you can see the bottom line there says complete data platform, unified analytics estate, empowered data professionals, and it's all powered by AI. Powered by AI, by the way, is not just taking the data, making it enabled for those tools. It's also building the tools and building the warehouse, building the engineering, applying your real-time analytics. AI is baked into the platform itself if you haven't dove into it too much. And it's extremely helpful for again, somebody who might not be a data scientist. They can easily get in and find out what they need to do their job. So where do we come in? So our team, the data platform team, we're looking at healthcare, and we said we want to bring in some tools and give our customers a unified data estate. So we built on top of Fabric. We built a solution on top of Fabric. And some on this call might be doing that with your own customers. You might be doing it as a system integrator. You might be doing it as an ISV. But we did the same thing. We built on top of the Fabric platform using the tooling available, and we wanted to provide a starting point for a lot of our customers to start building healthcare solutions. And that means the heart of it is the healthcare data models, right? So that's where we typically say that's the center of what we're doing. We've implemented a couple of data models that we can pull data in, make it a familiar format that you understand based on standards, and we provide these data models ahead of time so you don't have to start from scratch. The data transformations allow us to hydrate those data models. How do we get data into the system? We drop it in, we run our transformations, and it pulls it into the appropriate state. I'll go into a little bit more detail of that in a moment. But then we also, once we've got the data in our data models, we provide some analytical solutions focused on healthcare. And again, this is we followed industry standards on building large-scale enterprise data solutions to do this. So a lot of the things we'll see in a moment are probably familiar. But then we also have our multimodal AI orchestration, more work happening on that. But we've also built some tools that allow you to work with the data models we have in place. So like data discovery and cohort management is a use case you see in healthcare a lot, where I'm going to do a study as an example, and I need to find people for my study. Let me look at the data in my data estate and do some discovery on it, find out if this subset, this population is good for my study, and go from there. So it's a common use case. We tried to build some tools to help them work with the data once it's in these different data models. So again, we built on top of Fabric. Everything below that line, healthcare data solutions, is exactly what we saw on the previous slide. We're extending the Fabric platform with healthcare specific capabilities. This is just a little bit of a different spin on it. One of the things we want to make clear is you don't have to take everything, drop everything in place, and it's all or nothing with our solutions. And we'll see this a little bit later when I jump into the solution, that Fabric offers up an enormous amount of tools for connecting data, building multimodal data estates. You can drop our healthcare data solutions capabilities into an existing Fabric instance and work with your existing solutions. You might have an EHR data hub. We can extend your capabilities for doing discovery and building cohorts for research. You might already have existing analytics and dashboards. So we try to make our solution workable with what's already there, right? We don't want the expectation to be, oh, I have to start from scratch and drop everything. If I want to do healthcare, I need all these solutions. That is absolutely not the case. We intend to work with and be extended by our customers. So this isn't a turnkey solution. You turn it on. We've got a lot of things that work right out of the box, which is great, but it's meant to be extended because it's a platform as opposed to a turnkey solution. So this is just a little bit of a different view on the capabilities in Fabric and how you might roll it out in a more realistic scenario. And more specifically with our solution, this is a bit of an idea behind what we've built for a lot of our capabilities. We've adopted the medallion architecture, and it's basically the bronze, silver, gold model. And the way we talk about it is our bronze area is our staged area. Bronze is our landing zone, if you want to think of it that way. So you can see our data sources up at the top. We can support a certain number of data sources right now, and this is something we're expanding as we speak. We're planning for our next round, our next semester, and more work is going into this. But we can support, fire data, DICOM data, claims, SDOH, DAX Copilot. We can ingest data exported from Azure Health Data Services, both Fire and DICOM services. We can integrate with the D365 Customer Insights journeys. And once you've got this data, you can ingest it into our workspace and start running our pipelines. So the staged area is a landing area. It's meant to be immutable. This is something the Microsoft team owns, and it may be subject to change depending on how the capabilities roll out. So this is meant to be a landing area for your ingestion to kick off these transformations. It's meant to be, again, immutable. We're not going to change the data that comes in. We might extract some metadata, and we've got some conventions for how you can drop it in. You can either copy data into Fabric, or you can use Fabric shortcuts to point to external sources. If you're familiar with those, it's a really powerful capability because you don't consume storage. You can point it to an external location, leave data in its original place, but then we ingest it into our bronze tables for later processing. And I'll show you briefly what some of those look like when I jump into the solution. And in the middle, you can see between each of these different stages, we've got the staged, refined, and curated. So again, bronze, silver, gold, if you're familiar with the medallion architecture. In between, we've got some transformations, right? And that's where we come in with our industry standards for transforming, let's say, fire into our healthcare data model, or clinical data, DICOM data into our healthcare data model. The refined area is where you would start really looking at the data. And our healthcare data model is based on FHIR, right? So FHIR, if you're not familiar with it, is an industry standard for healthcare. It's a subset of the HL7 standard. It's JSON based. It defines both the data schema and a protocol. Very similar to other protocols for like industries like finance. I guess it would be EDI, if I'm getting the acronym correct. Basically, it defines the data structures in a largely clinical, but you can do payer data as well. So we've built out a relational FHIR model as our healthcare data model. And it allows us to unify data coming in from multiple different sources. So we can bring in our clinical data. It's already in a FHIR format, so that mapping is relatively straightforward. But we can also map DICOM imaging data in, and that's what I'll show you in a moment. That's where we start unifying the data and putting it into a single place. And that's just one example. We've got other modalities we bring in as well. From there, we further refine it, and you can go against the silver model, the refined model, build some work, and you can build your own transformations after this. This is just one model that we were focused on that follows an industry standard that you should be familiar with. But then you can further we've built some further transformations that provide OMOP as another industry standard for observational medical outcomes partnership. I'm glad they put the key up because I can never remember the acronyms. So that's a industry standard that allows you to do analytics. It's focused on analytics. So we transformed FHIR data into OMOP based on industry standards, industry guidance. We reached out to a lot of different organizations for that. But we also have customer insights as another capability that we have that we'll build a gold lakehouse off of. We'll build a care management analytics lakehouse off of the refined healthcare data model after the refined data through some transformations. Or the customer can build their own. So the customer specific lakehouse is exactly what it sounds like. I just realized there's a typo in my my lakehouse spelling, but you can build your own off of this. This is where I meant you could build your own transformations. You can build your own models off of this. As an example, I wanted to integrate with Power Platform, and I just did a real quick a data pipeline, and I transformed Silver into a table that a lakehouse that I could use for virtual table in Dataverse. And I just did that as, again, not a data scientist. So if you're familiar with healthcare, a data estate, you can do whatever meets your customer needs. So that's really curated, and that's typically what you would hand off to your customers. So we've got the Discover and Build cohorts tooling, which I'll show that to you because it's always a fun one to show off. It's a good way of showing how the data is unified into a single estate. But this is where you would also probably build your Power BI reports off of, or just share the data out because you might have some other use cases for, let's say, research. We just want to make data available as a service, right? And you can share out these different gold lakehouses as for report writers, people who are doing analytics, people who are doing research studies, that kind of stuff. And around this, you can see a lot of our different personas. We've got one thing I glossed over was Purview. So Purview is baked into Fabric as well as a governance tool. So we've got some compliance templates go there as well. But you can see this is our implementation of that. Back to what I was talking about earlier, if we want to connect data, that's where the staged area is at. Fabric will allow you to connect these different data sources, whether it's bring your own data or connect to an external source. We want to transform and harmonize it. That's where we get into the refined. And then we want to make it available to these different personas through the curated layer. So this is our medallion architecture as an implementation of that kind of bigger picture idea of connect, transform, and make available to these different personas. So this is just kind of coming back to that wheel and spoke view we saw earlier with the modalities. This is just a very quick overview of some of the capabilities that we offer. We offer clinical records data in our lakehouses, as we just looked at, imaging data, patient engagement, so SDOH, social determinants of health, and claims data. We have DAX Copilot data, which is in preview right now. And we've got a lot of other modalities we're working on. So more to come on this. That's the beauty of Fabric. We can extend the data models that we already have in place, or we can drop in new ones depending on the data that we're looking at. So this is just another view on that previous state. And then this is just to drill in a little bit to our data model. So again, our data model is the center of what we're doing. It's intended, our relational FHIR data model you see as the center of it that we were talking about. It's intended to cover the major healthcare data domains, and it's meant to be a composite of all these different stores coming together into a centralized location. But we're also working on and building out. We've got some other preview features for enrichments, so if we can enrich all of these data stores with text, objects, imaging, embeddings, that kind of stuff. And those capabilities are rolling out in preview as we speak. So again, just another kind of zoomed in view of our data model and give you a kind of a ERD view of it. With the back to AI, so we did all this stuff. We brought all this data together. We connected it. We transformed it. We harmonized it into these different lake houses and data models. But we've also got this other ecosystem of all these AI services and models. We've got all this additional data that we can integrate back into the data model. So this is where we talk about our enrichments and the the potential use cases for this. You can see this is where it is a bit of a loop. We build all this stuff in Fabric. We bring all this data together. We do all the transformations. And now, oh, I need to remove the timer from my slide. We have all these enrichments. So pull that data back in where it's needed. So you might want to pull in the med image parse, med image insights back into our clinical imaging store. Some of the use cases you can see over here just as possibilities for AI enrichment into your data model is you can create targeted outreach and care plans, optimize the cohort selection as we talked about, and I'll show you our tools that we're working on so far, do insights into disease progression and analysis for clinical trial matching. Sorry, I got to remove that slide. There's a timer on it, I believe. But you can see we've got a lot of use cases, and these are just some that we've come up with talking to our customers and looking for what they can do with the data that we have. And you can see lots of possibilities there for AI enrichment and different types of data to be brought in. So some of our public preview AI use cases that we're putting out there right now with text analytics for health, you can see the details for each of these. The SDOH extraction with OpenAI. SDOH is an interesting one because it is there's lots of industry data sets, but there's no one standard for how you should deal with SDOH. So it's a real challenge to put things together. So we try to talk to as many of our customers as we can to put together a model that might work for as many as possible. So sentiment analysis with OpenAI, med image insights, and med image parse, a couple of different capabilities going out in public preview. These are all available. They should be out as of a couple of weeks ago, so you can go and install some of these previews. If you want more information on this, my information was on that first slide, so you can just drop me a note and I'll get you more information. But what's out in the as a capability you can install in GA and preview as well. We've also got some analytical solutions with OMOP, care management, D365, patient outreach, and our cohort clinical research tool. And again, OMOP is an industry standard focused on analytics, so it's a data model that is tailored towards analytics in the healthcare space. Care management is basically if you've got an environment, an enterprise where you want to look at how things are doing. I think of it as a kind of a report card on your organization, and that might be a little oversimplification, but give you some insights into how you're dealing with your patients. D365 Customer Insights. This is a first-party integration with our Dynamics tooling. Patient outreach analytics. Basically, this is patient outreach is I've got a patient that was just discharged, make sure they're making their appointments, they're taking their medications, they're doing follow-ups and all that fun stuff. And then discover and build cohorts. I believe I mentioned that earlier, where you're trying to kick off a research study, for example, or I'm just doing some generic research and I want to find some data that matches what I need. And again, I'll show you that one. I'll jump in, show you that tool because it's a neat one to look at. This is just kind of an inventory of the tooling available. So been focused on Fabric as we've been talking here. And again, we'll jump in and talk about it a little bit more by looking at what we've implemented. But our data platform team has other tooling. We've got some tools for interoperability, right? So we've got a FHIR service that is a full implementation of the FHIR specification, both in the API as well as the schema. We've got a DICOM service as well. And with those, we've got some transformations. So if you've got old school HL7v2, you can transform it into FHIR for ingestion. You can use it independent of Fabric if you like, but it's typically a good way to transform a bit of legacy data because HL7v2 has been around for quite a few years and they haven't upgraded to FHIR yet. So it's a good way of doing a transformation. And we've got a lot of templates on that for, I think, 65 or so different templates for different records coming into the system. CCDA is another one, or custom JSON into FHIR. We've got some work we're doing on interoperability with connections to on-prem services. That'll be coming out in private preview. If anybody on the call has healthcare customers interested in doing connectivity to old school HL7 on-prem, drop me a line and I'll connect you with our team. But that should be rolling out in private preview. And the idea there is, if you don't have an integration service in place, it's really tough to get the data out of these on-prem systems. So we're working on a few services there, and that'll help basically get data into our Fabric platform for these analytics, for these different modalities. But you can see our transformations, our data model analytics solutions. Some of these are talked about already. So the transformations, we can take clinical data in a FHIR format. We can take DICOM data, claims, CMS flat files, SDOH data sets, D365. We can also transform FHIR to OMOP. Those are some things I'll show you in a moment. And we have a private preview for DAX Copilot data, which is more conversational data. Our data models, we've talked about a bit. We've got relational FHIR. That's kind of the center of a lot of what we do. But we've also got an imaging metastore, SDOH public data sets, patient engagement, and we're working on a public preview of some more AI enrichment stores and some other things we're working on. The gear means it's future, right? We're working on these things in the future. We don't have a preview set right yet. Then the analytical solutions, got all this data in these, we've transformed it into these data models. How do I look at it? We've offered some tooling to give you a start on the analytic solutions with whether it's reports or different transformations for OMOP, for example, care management, patient outreach, and some other tooling that we talked about. So working on these things. So this kind of also is not just an inventory, but it's also kind of a path, right? Get data into the solution, transform it into a format that's usable in these data models, and then help you get started on the analytical side of things. And these are, again, based on a lot of customer conversations, industry standards, research we're doing, and we're trying to cover as much as we can while making it flexible to suit your needs. So it's not as I'll say again, it's meant to be extended. It's meant to be added to. It's not a turnkey solution for data. It's meant to be built upon. And just a final slide here about trust. So Microsoft is very serious about compliance and security with healthcare data. Like any data, we've got compliance baked into everything we do, but healthcare is especially sensitive because the nature of the data and a lot of requirements around it with HIPAA and high trust certification and all that. So we're fortunate that the Azure platform offers a lot of this, but we're running Azure and Fabric offer a lot of these capabilities baked into the platform, but we're aware of everything we do go through these certifications as well. So with that, let me jump over and get out of the slide deck, and I'll share my screen, and I'll pull up an environment just to show you, pardon me, show you the solution in action. So I'm going to stop sharing here real quick and share my screen and bring up an environment. Let me find the share button. So if you haven't seen Fabric, and I'll give it a moment, it looks like my screen is sharing. If anybody can't see the screen, please drop a note.
Yeah, we are able to see the screen. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So this is Fabric. If you're not familiar with it, which again, I'm guessing everybody here is pretty familiar here, but we typically work within workspaces just like everybody else. And whenever you get our solution, so how do you get the stuff I just talked about, right? So I put together a very simple workspace, new workspace, all that, tied it to capacity, and I did a new item, right? So it's pretty much that simple, right? To get healthcare data solutions, it's a tile in the available list of solutions. I just happen to favor it. You can find it by searching healthcare. I've already done this, but you'll see it available. Once it's installed, it installs, and we have a new type called Healthcare Data Solutions. It's a first-party solution by Microsoft. But when you install it, when you want to install it, you can drill into the capabilities and see what's available. And I think that the frames are a little bit behind, but I've got this list of capabilities, and I'm on the wrong. Close all this down real quick. The iframes are not being friendly to me. Should be not installed. I want to see the setup screen. There we go. The tiles were hidden behind the scenes here. It was being flaky on me. So I can walk into a solution setup with our solution. So this is a really handy thing where we've got data foundations is kind of walk you through the capabilities. what's required, and it's a bit of a wizard, right? Gives you some nice explanations, walks you through what you're installing. You can see the modules that we install, and this is required for everything else. We've got a foundations module. It's exactly what it sounds like. These are the fundamentals. These are capabilities that are everything else is depending on shared lake houses. Pardon me, shared notebooks. There's some assemblies behind the scenes. So we'll install an environment which helps you take our custom assemblies, custom packages. We've got some pipelines. We'll install some lake houses and then some notebooks that can invoke our custom services. This is all within Fabric. We don't call out to external services except for 1 or 2 cases. But for the foundations, everything is self-contained. One of the things I like to call out, so when you're dealing with analytics, it's very challenging to try to test it. If I've got a simple application, like a lot of the work I've done in the past is business applications. I can say, bring up the new screen, walk through the fields, do validation, much easier to test. So what we've decided to put forth to make things better for our customers and validate our own work is sample data, which is several million records worth of data. We've got 300 or so imaging studies, 51,000 patients, and associated data. There's a lot of data in there, observations, encounters, that kind of stuff, claims data, and SDOH public data sets. This is all available. If you want to install it, it comes free with a solution, and it's a really good way to build some repeatable tests and just see how things work. So if I go next, then I get to see my modules. And again, the other thing I mentioned is we don't want this to be drop everything and install our stuff. We try to make our solution as modular as possible. And here you can see that, you can install only what you need. If I install, let's say we do have some dependencies in there. So discover and build cohorts relies on OMOP. So it grays it out, requires you to install it. But you can only install what you need. You can install Foundation and install nothing else and poke around if you like. But this is a very nice capability to walk you through what's available. And I've already done this because it takes a bit of time to publish everything and install. So I don't want to sit and watch paint dry. So I've already created a new workspace over here. And let me pull that up. See, there's a question. I'm not sure about the XMLA endpoint, and I'm not sure the use case. Again, I'm not sure what the case is with import. Do you mind putting in more information? We'll see if we can get you an answer. So when you install everything, and I installed most modules, you can see it'll come back in the workspace and you'll see all the things expanded out. Just walk through real quickly some of the things we'll get with our solution. First thing I like to point out is we get an environment. If you're familiar with Fabric, this allows you to put in specifics for a runtime. It's what includes our custom packages for our IP. And there is just some additional settings in there based on, and allows us to control the dependency for our packages. Then we install the next big thing we install our lake houses, and I've installed a couple of modules. And what you get with, I think if you were paying attention on the previous screen, Foundations gives me admin, I get bronze, and I get silver. Those 3 come with the foundations. I've also installed care management analytics, and I've installed our OMOP. And I believe, I didn't do, there's no lake house for imaging. There's just some transformations. So I installed several modules and we got some additional bits. This is installed by our setup. And this will all be administered. You walk back to the settings, click a tile, install the capabilities, and it'll install the related components. And the lake houses are where we have our data model, right? Administration is basically, this is again, just a bit of the art of the possible, as I first talked about. It's an example of things you can do. We use the administrative lakehouse. It's a real nice example of a lot of the tracing in Fabric can be really painful. It's almost too much information to dig through. So we've built some custom tables to track custom events. So we've got some transformations to run in the back end, some Fabric-based services, and how do we tell our end users what's happening? We've got a business events and an execution summary table, as well as just some JSON configuration files that our notebooks will use. We try to configure as much as we can, and you can drill into this and poke around. This is managed. You can modify this by hand, but it's also managed by our installation process as well. And it's just a JSON parameterized file. You can see some of the information stored in here. but the business events show me validation errors if I've had any. The execution summary shows me what pipelines have been run, and it's a nice way of not having to dig through the monitor tab that Fabric offers, because that again can be really, even if you really are very familiar with it, it can be a ton to dig through. So our admin lakehouse is just, again, another thing that you can do. It's another idea you can use for building out your solutions. It's just been very handy. Bronze is the lakehouse. It's our landing area. It's meant to be immutable. Whenever I bring in, you can see I've got some SDOH custom tables. If you install just the foundation, you'll see clinical fire and imaging DICOM. And those are two I'll just show very quickly because I'll show that in the demo in a minute. If you're familiar with fire, we basically take the entire fire blob of JSON and plop it into a row. And then we extract some of the metadata out of literally the metadata tag in Fire so that you can work against it. And a couple of other fields for further transformation, like where did it come from, source system, and like we have a naming convention with our folders down below. We've also got imaging DICOM, and I believe it's like 30 or so different columns we pull out that are metadata around the imaging data. So, and it's exactly what you think, is image embedded in there, but there's an enormous amount of metadata around it. So we extract that out as well. And this is our landing zone. So what I've done previously, and I've run all of our sample data and then ingested data into here. And where that sample data came from is it's right down here. We just drop it into a folder. A lakehouse, you can have either folders or tables. Again, I'm guessing a lot of people on the call are familiar with that, but if you're not, we have a convention for sample data. If I want to ingest things, if I want to bring data in from external sources, we still get a convention we use, and it's outlined in our documentation, but this makes it easier for our customers to come in and know where things are going. So we try to follow conventions that are intuitive for how we handle the processing of our data. Failed is exactly what it sounds like if I get any failed files. And I believe our sample data actually includes like 1 or 2 failures just to show you how failures work for the transformations. But you can go down here and drill into all of our sample data. They're either in ND-JSON files for clinical, as an example. You can see them all here. You can see it's quite a bit. I think some of them are like 2 or 3 gigabytes a piece. So lots of data for you to work with and test out. SDOH is in a bunch of different formats. Claims is in its own format, as well as imaging. We've got DCM files that are available. So these I ingested from sample data, but if I was ingesting data from an external source, as an example, if you're not familiar, let's say I'm bringing in clinical data, and we've got an example of this in our docs with our Azure Health Data Services export. You can build what's called a shortcut and point it to an external location. This is independent of our healthcare solution. This is a Fabric capability, which is really powerful. I can point it to an existing location within Fabric, or I can point it to Azure, a Gen 2 storage. This is one. We have an example for our export for Azure Health Data Services. Point it to Google or Amazon even, or Dataverse if you work with Power Platform. This is a really handy capability because I'm not copying data and chewing up space. So I can just point it out. Our transformations will pull in only what's needed. You keep the original data in the external location, saves you some processing. So this is our bronze. And again, it's meant to be, this is something we might change in the future. So we don't recommend you work here except for if you're building custom transformations. But just note that this might change in the future. Our transformations will work against this lakehouse and move it through Silver. And I'll talk about this real quick, and then I'll show you some of the notebooks and pipelines. This is, again, the centerpiece for a lot of our transformations go into Silver. If you're familiar with Fire, if you happen to have some healthcare background, each table represents a Fire resource, and we've expanded at one level. And again, this is just a convention that we followed on some other efforts with the industry for enabling SQL on Fire. So we've taken the first level of attributes, put them out into text or number and that kind of stuff, dates, into proper types. Otherwise, if you're familiar with Fire, it's a hierarchical JSON format. So we've taken the child nodes and just put them in as blobs, and you can use some T-SQL constructs to do queries against them. But I can run T-SQL against this data set and query Fire using SQL, which if you're familiar with querying JSON with code. It's painful. Now I can run T-SQL against, and I think I have an example. If I have a shared query here, I'll pull it up. But being able to run T-SQL against Fire data, against JSON structured data, is really powerful. And here's a real simple one. I think I have the appropriate data in here. You can see this is going against silver, and silver again. I'm going patient explanation of benefits, and I'm running a couple of queries. And again, if I had to do this in code, I'd have to, C# code or whatever. Again, I'm more of a developer than a data scientist. That's painful, but I can do it in SQL here. Is really, really nice. Takes a moment. I just spun this up a few minutes before the call, so it's probably still running in the background. But that's a really powerful bit, and you can see there's some baked in capabilities of T-SQL to extract data from JSON. So it allows me to basically run SQL against a relational Fire. So I'll let that run in the background. But the other things we deploy are notebooks, and notebooks are. Let me just show you one very quickly. DICOM, for example. Notebooks are ways of exporting your code, right? Pardon me, executing code, executing code against your lakehouse. The notebooks we deploy, we don't want you to change because they're following certain conventions, and what they're doing is calling back into our services. And you can see here are custom packages that we deploy, and you have to import a reference to it. That's deployed as part of the environment, and then we call these out and we've parameterized them as much as we can. You can build your own notebook and make it as complex as you like, but ours we want you to keep as is, because we may make changes to them in the future, but they invoke our pre-built transformations. So this is how we reference and do the transformation, let's say from Fire to relational Fire. And where these are used is we deploy some pipelines. So you can build your own notebook, or you can leverage ours and build data pipelines. And you just hide this little easier to see. And where I was doing, I'll just pull up another one here. And as it loads, you can see a pipeline is exactly, if you're not familiar with it. It basically, we call out to some of our custom notebooks. These are bound to notebooks. And you can go in and drill in and look at these, but chain these together. It's first going to do, and this is one for imaging with Clinical Foundation. So it's going to move some files around if they're local. It's going to do some extraction of those files. So pull them out of zip files and extract the metadata out of them. Then it's going to do a Fire convert it into Fire into our lakehouse, and then do a bronze ingestion, and then it'll convert it to silver. So again, you can see our notebooks are easily tied together. You want to do some work in the middle, you can inject your own. You can build your own. You can extend it after the fact. You can add nodes to this. The pipelines can be changed, or start from scratch, do a copy, and build a new one, right? If you like. So these are meant to be composable blocks. What I want to show you, because I think we're coming up on time, and I wanted to, looks like there's a question or two. I'll show you. Let me go back and see if my silver query ran. There we go. So you can see I'm getting a whole bunch of data back, and I'm able to extract the data out using JSON, a couple of different results 1 and 2. So that's really, really powerful. So, but I wanted to show you real quickly, close these down. I have too many open, and show you wrong workspace. Here we go. I wanted to show you the capability we built. So we've got these lake houses. We've got bronze, silver, gold. And I mentioned OMOP. OMOP is another standard. We've got documentation on what the standard looks like. But what I wanted to show was we've got a cohort tool. And what the cohort tool does, this is available within Fabric, as you can see. It's part of our solution. And we've got OMOP is complex. OMOP is really, really tough, right? It's a very complex format. It's meant for analytics, understanding some of the nuances behind like the concepts, they call them codable concepts in Fire, can be really tough. So what we've built is this tool to allow you to query it, and it starts with natural language. And what I ran earlier, just because it takes a moment or two, as I said, take natural language, throw it into my Copilot, and it'll convert it into a query. So ages, conditions, and image occurrence is the example that I clicked. And I think, well, yeah, I ran this 2 days ago. And so give me a patient that are 40 years of age with a silent microhemorrhage. I don't know what that code is. And then with MRIs, right? So it constructed this query for me. It just takes a moment. I didn't want to have to sit and watch it churn and give you messages, but it ran here, and you can go see, and you can go modify this query, and you can see this using the label for the code as well. I don't have to know what the code is. I can put in my dates. I can modify this and update my criteria. I can also look at the query behind it, and then you can see that that's a relatively simple request, but it tells me like there's modality concept, condition concept, these different tables that it has to understand where to get the data from. I'm not an expert on OMOP, so thankfully this would save me an enormous amount of time. And then, how do I know which ones have images, that kind of fun stuff. I can find people with a birth date, that one I could do. But the other stuff where I'm joining on these different codes is a really powerful tool. And when I run this is the scenario would be like, I'm looking for these patients for a study, right? And I can just run the query, and I can see it in line in a tabular format. You can see I ran it previously. It created and executed that query, and you can see, by the way, I glossed over this, that I'm running against my gold OMOP Lakehouse, and it understood the schema behind it enough to construct that query, run it, and this tabular data is fine too. I can save this off into another format. I can save it off into another destination. I can save it into a Lakehouse. I can save it to a file, come back to it later, or I can just save my query and rerun it. Or one of the things that I think is really powerful here, and again, it's an example of bringing that data together from two different modalities. Started with clinical data, and we've got this record viewer, and the reason it's kind of neat is it's in OMOP. We started with bronze, our landing zone, then we have a refined, and then we have the curated, I think is what it was called on that slide. But I've got clinical data and imaging data that's all brought together into a single location, and I can query for both of them and see them together. So the demographic data is pretty boring. It's only a couple of fields, but obviously pretty important. It's got the birth date and race and gender. But I can also look at the clinical notes that come with, right? These are in there, and these are attached as part of that data set that was previously returned in the tabular format. But then I can also, jump in and look at the image and its associated metadata. So if you're just looking for the demographic data, and I'm a clinician looking for the notes, I can review that here. I can hand off this query to an imaging specialist. They can view the images in line and decipher all this metadata, which is super complex. So you can see that this is looking at two different modalities brought together into one location, and it's kind of a proof that we're bringing things together into a single unified estate for different personas. So that is our cohort builder tool, and again, just an idea of what you can do with the data. The other thing comes with again, just as an idea of the art of the possible, we've come with some predefined reports that come with out of the box. Sorry, this isn't. When I ran all these transformations, I didn't write a line of code. So when I'm showing this data, I just ran pardon me, I did write some code to copy sample files, but I could do that manually in Fabric if I wanted to. I have a script that I wrote in a notebook to copy some sample files, and then I just ran transformations and a couple of transformations and it put data into these different lakehouses. So you can see on my cohort, on that 298 patients, I believe, 298 patients, here's an overview of is it statistically significant? Is it broadly spread out over a geographic distribution? The procedure frequency, drug use count, all that information is just, we took a first pass at it and said, okay, now you can customize this and build your own report off of it. And then you can compare it to the Lakehouse. So again, and this always cracks me up. It's basically covering the whole state. So you can see what you can do in Fabric with ingesting data, building lakehouses, transforming the data into a unified format, and then putting reports on that last curated version. So, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to look at the questions here real quick. So, yeah, I see. Sorry, the retail solutions demo, no problem. I see something about Azure Key Vault. The Key Vault, there is I'll share a link to the documentation here. If you go out to our Fabric documentation, we have, if you're going to install the Azure Health Data Services export, it requires a Key Vault. That Key Vault is installed. There's another package in Azure, an Azure application. I'm not sure what they call it. Azure offering that you have to install. Unfortunately, it's named the same thing, so it's a little bit confusing. But I'll drop a note to the documentation. You install that on Azure, and what that'll do is that'll create an Azure function for you, Key Vault associated with it, give you a few steps for wiring up managed identity. And then what that'll do is our pipeline will call the export service in Azure Health Data Services, and the Key Vault is required for that. So I'll drop a link to the docs in there for the Key Vault bit. And yeah, I think, yeah, there we go. So both questions were on the Key Vault. That's awesome. Yes, the cohort builder is under, it should be public preview at this point. It should be installable from, pardon me. I'll go to the install. It should be, assuming my iframes don't get wonky here, it should be right here. It should be public preview, should be readily available. It previously was we had to whitelist your environment, but or tenant, pardon me. I don't think that's required anymore, but go through the setup, and it's called Discover and Build Cohorts, and it'll prompt you to install also the OMOP capability as well. So it'll tell you down here, and you can deploy you first deploy OMOP. If you go through the setup, it'll deploy them together. So if you resume your solution setup, just check them off on this side of things. So if you do that, it'll automatically select OMOP, and you should be able to deploy it from there. If you've already run through the solution setup, you can go back to that tile, and let me get out of here. Close that. You can go back to this tile and pick individual ones if you'd like and install just that one. So you can see that, the ones that are flagged as public preview should be readily available. If you can't see it, drop me a note and we'll take a look at your environment and see what's been deployed. You might have to do an update on the solution itself. So they were coming up on time. Great questions. And I will find the link for you. Any questions, feel free to drop me a line. I think my LinkedIn, my profile's dropped in the chat. Thank you for that. Feel free to drop me a line and connect. And happy to hear any stories you might have, any feedback you have. Feel free to drop me a line. If you've got customers interested in rolling this out, that'd be awesome. But again, for this kind of this call, I didn't want it to be a sales pitch. I more wanted to show, here's some really cool things you can do with Fabric. So hopefully you took that away from it. But absolutely happy to talk to you more about the healthcare solutions. If you have any questions, drop me a line.